My ex-boyfriend invited me to his wedding to show off his wealthy fiancée, but my plus one turned the tables. In the most unexpected way, I always knew something wasn't right. We try to fool ourselves, don't we? We pretend everything is fine, but deep down, we know it isn't. That was the case with Dylan. At first, it seemed perfect. That ideal relationship thing, with him smiling that charming smile, always being nice to me. But I started to realize that actually, he wasn't putting in as much effort as I was. I worked all day, busting my ass to make things work, while he was at home. And every time I tried to talk about it, he'd just brush it off, act like nothing was happening. And the worst part, I paid for everything. I was the one keeping up with the bills, being the one to support him when he didn't have anything. It's not that he was a terrible guy, he just wasn't trying. I remember one month, I was a bit tight on cash and asked him to help out. He just looked at me, said nothing, and left like it was no big deal. But then, I started to realize something important. When I got that promotion, I finally saw a clear path ahead. Until then, I was so focused on trying to fix the relationship that I didn't see how much I was sacrificing. The money, the confidence, the satisfaction, everything was growing, but not in the way I imagined. That's when I realized I was drowning in this. Dylan wasn't contributing to anything. He wasn't there to support me. He was just there. I realized that the promotion, though amazing, was just another sign that I deserved more, something better. And that's when I decided there's no more room for him in my life. I wasn't willing to carry the weight anymore. That's when it hit me, crystal clear, like a lightning bolt on a stormy night. I needed to break up with him. I was in the kitchen, standing over a cutting board piled with half-chopped vegetables. The rhythmic chop of the knife against the board echoed in the quiet, broken only by the faint hum of the stove. There was something strangely symbolic about it all, creating nourishment while realizing I was starving emotionally. It wasn't the first time I'd felt that way, but this time, it was different. There was no inner debate, no second-guessing or back and forth. The thought emerged fully formed, resolute, like it had been buried deep and just waiting for the right moment to surface. I have to do this, I whispered to myself, almost as if saying it out loud would anchor the decision. My hands stilled, the knife resting in the groove it had made in the cutting board. A wave of calm washed over me, but beneath it was an undercurrent of nervous anticipation. Would he understand? How would I even begin? These questions flickered briefly in my mind, but they couldn't shake the certainty that had taken root in my chest. Dinner was abandoned. I wiped my hands on a towel and wandered into the living room, where he sat on the couch, scrolling mindlessly on his phone. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his face, a face I had once been so drawn to but now felt distant from. My heart twisted, not with regret, but with the weight of what I was about to say. Can we talk? My voice came out steady, but inside, my nerves were taut like a string about to snap. He looked up, confused, and set his phone aside. I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from trembling. And then I said it. Every word felt like I was releasing a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. I think we need to end this, I began, each syllable measured, deliberate. His expression shifted, confusion, disbelief, then a flicker of pain. I kept going, explaining that it wasn't about blame or anger, just an aching truth that I couldn't ignore anymore. The room felt heavier with each passing second, the weight of unspoken emotions pressing down on both of us. But even as I spoke, I felt lighter, like I was finally stepping out from under a shadow I had carried for far too long. When I finished, there was a long silence. He stared at me, searching for something in my face. Maybe a sign that I didn't mean it, or that I'd change my mind. But I didn't. I couldn't. It wasn't easy. Breaking up never is. But in that moment, I knew it was the right thing. And his reaction? Wow, it was something else. He just lost it, got so angry, like really angry. He stood up so fast that he knocked over the glass of water on the table, didn't even notice it spilling everywhere. He called me selfish, said I was too modern, like that was some kind of insult. And then, this part still gets me. He brought up Bella. Yeah, Bella. This girl from his office, that he's been spending way too much time with lately. I mean, I knew they'd been getting closer, but hearing her name in this conversation, that stung, and it wasn't just her name. He actually had the nerve to say, "Unlike you, she's more marriage material." Can you believe that? Marriage material. Like I was some kind of trial run, and she was the upgrade. Hearing him compare me to her, it hurt, I'm not gonna lie. But at the same time, it was like this weird wave of relief hit me. I didn't have to pretend anymore, didn't have to justify my feelings or explain myself. I wasn't his to judge, anymore. And honestly, the more he talked, the more sure I became. Every word he threw at me just solidified it. I looked at him, ranting about Bella and how I wasn't good enough, and all I could think was, this is exactly why I'm done. It's strange how sometimes the thing you're dreading ends up giving you the clarity you didn't even know you needed. The fight was ugly, and it was tough. But I knew I had to do this. He wasn't good for me anymore, and then I told him to move out of my apartment. I was just so tired of it all, I needed space for myself. And I think that was the final straw. I didn't want anyone there who wasn't helping me grow. So, here's where the plot thickens, right? I mean, I thought kicking him out would be the hard part, and after that, I'd finally breathe easy. But oh no, life loves to throw a curveball just when you think you're in the clear. About a week after he packed up and left, I was driving by my old house. Our house, technically. And what do I see? Him. Standing there, in my house. And he wasn't alone. Bella was with him. Yeah, Bella. Miss Marriage Material. The girl from his office he'd been getting a little too close to for my comfort. There she was, grinning like she'd just won the lottery, acting like she owned the place. It wasn't just some casual smile either. It was that smug, overly confident kind of smile that made my stomach churn. And him? He looked comfortable. Like he hadn't just upended our relationship, like he didn't have a care in the world. And me? Oh, I wish I could say I had some badass, movie-worthy reaction, like storming in or flipping him off, but nope, I just froze. Right there, in the middle of the street, like my brain short-circuited. I didn't know if I wanted to cry, scream, or laugh at the sheer audacity of it all. Honestly, I think I felt all three emotions at once, which is not a fun cocktail, let me tell you. But you know what stung the most? It wasn't seeing them together, though that was a punch to the gut. No, the worst part was the realization that he didn't even try to hide it. Like moving Bella into our home was the most natural thing in the world. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just him moving on. This was him trying to erase me. And that hurt in ways I wasn't prepared for. All right, buckle up, because this is where things get real messy. I thought getting him out of my life would be the hardest part, right? I figured after that, I'd have some space to breathe, to let go of all the tension that had been building up. But of course, life had a different plan. As if my decision to kick him out wasn't dramatic enough, the universe had to throw me a curveball that I never saw coming. It was a week after he packed his stuff and left, and I was just casually driving by my old house, our house, still burned in my mind as the place that used to feel like home. I had no idea what I expected, but it sure as hell wasn't seeing. Him standing there, right in front of my house. And guess who was standing beside him? Bella. Yeah, Bella. The girl from his office who he had been getting a little too close to for my liking. The one he kept talking about, telling me how different she was, how easy it was to talk to her. The one who, to him, was apparently more marriage material. I couldn't believe my eyes. There she was, grinning from ear to ear like she had just been handed the keys to a brand new car. But it wasn't a simple, polite grin. It was the kind of smile that oozed arrogance, like she owned the world, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. And him? He wasn't even acting like he had just torn my heart out. He wasn't awkward or hesitant, like someone who knew they'd done something wrong. No, he looked completely at ease, like he was meant to be there, like nothing had ever changed. And me? Oh, I'd love to say I did something dramatic, like storming in there and telling them both off, or even just making a quick getaway with my middle finger held high. But nope, none of that. Instead, I just froze. I stopped right there in the middle of the street, stuck in my car, staring at the scene unfolding in front of me. My brain completely short-circuited, and I was left with this jumbled mess of emotions. Anger, sadness, humiliation, you name it. I couldn't even process it. One minute, I was just driving along, and the next, I was witnessing the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. The worst part? It wasn't just seeing them together, though that stung more than I care to admit. It wasn't even the pain of seeing her in my space, acting like she belonged there. It was the realization that he didn't even have the decency to hide it. No hesitation, no shame. He was moving on, and not only that, he was trying to erase me. The home that we had built together was now a backdrop for their new reality. And that cut deeper than I ever thought possible. It was like he wasn't just leaving me behind. He was actively rewriting our history, turning our life into something I wasn't even part of anymore. And I wasn't ready for that. Not at all. I stepped away. I knew I had to, but inside, I was crushed. Still, something new started to grow inside of me. The pain was deep, but it also gave me clarity. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story anymore. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life throws in another curveball. Dylan actually married Bella. Yeah, you heard me right. The guy who tore our relationship apart, who couldn't even respect the space we once shared, was now tying the knot with her. At first, when I found out, I didn't even know how to react. Was I supposed to be angry? Of course, I felt a surge of anger bubbling up. Like, how could he just move on so quickly? As if I didn't even exist anymore. But then, there was this weird detachment too. It was like I had already detached myself from the situation so much that I didn't even know if I had the right to be upset anymore. But you know how it is, right? The mind can play these tricks on you, and before I knew it, something inside me just snapped awake. I wasn't going to let this go without making a statement. It wasn't about stopping the wedding or getting back at him, no. It was more about standing my ground. I was done being the girl who was left behind, done with being the one who was replaced without so much as a second thought. So yeah, I made a decision that probably wasn't the most rational one at the time. I was going to their wedding. And here's the twist. I wasn't going alone. Nope. I decided to bring Jake, Bella's ex. Why? Well, let's just say it wasn't just about revenge, at least not the way you might think. Jake and Bella's past wasn't exactly a fairy tale, either. He had his own history with her, and honestly, I figured it was kind of poetic for both of us to show up, to be there as the reminders of their past lives. It wasn't just me wanting to stir the pot, though. There was something about the idea of going there with him, two exes, watching their new lives unfold, that felt oddly fitting. I'm not going to lie. It was a bit of a crazy decision, but in that moment, it felt like the only one that made sense. I wanted to feel something again, to get out of this numb, detached space I had been in since Dylan walked out. And showing up there, at that wedding, with someone who also had his own baggage with Bella, it felt like the perfect way to face the whole messed up situation head on. Whatever happened next, I was ready to finally stop being the passive observer in my own life. There's something oddly satisfying about just letting go and watching the chaos unfold, especially when you know you have no part in it anymore. That wedding, it was a perfect mess. Bella, acting like she had it all figured out, smiling like she had won some grand prize, and there she was, trying to play the role of the perfect bride. But oh, when she bolted with Jake, of all people, in the middle of the ceremony, I couldn't help but smile. There was a kind of delicious irony in that moment, and it hit me. This was the universe doing its thing. Was it revenge? Maybe a little, but not in the way you'd think. I wasn't out to ruin her happiness or get back at Dylan. No, it wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about taking back control over my own narrative, and this little twist of fate was like the final chapter of a book I was ready to close. Jake and Bella? Their little dramatic exit was like the final punctuation on their story. The fact that it all happened right there, in front of everyone, was like some cosmic joke. A joke that, for once, I wasn't the punchline of Dylan's face. That was priceless. You could see it in his eyes. The hurt, the betrayal, the realization that maybe he wasn't as much in control as he thought. And me? I was calm. A little amused, even. I watched it all happen without a shred of guilt or bitterness, because deep down, I knew this was the outcome they deserved. They made their choices, and now they had to live with them. And I was finally free. The weight of that whole mess, of their expectations, their drama, it was all gone. I was no longer tangled up in their lives. The chapter with Dylan and Bella was closed, and I was finally at peace. It wasn't about the wedding, or the breakup, or the drama. It was about knowing that the choices they made had no power over me anymore. Months passed, and Dylan still wouldn't let it go. He blamed me for the failure of his marriage. He came after me, sent messages, showed up at my place. He tried everything. But my response was simple. Nothing. I didn't want anything to do with him. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. I knew deep down he was just trying to manipulate me again, like he always did. When he showed up one last time, asking for a second chance, I didn't think twice. I confronted him, said everything I needed to say, and finally kicked him. Out of my life for good. Can you believe that? After all of that, I ended up meeting Bella and Jake again? I know, it sounds crazy, but it happened. Bella came to me and apologized. She told me how her relationship with Dylan made her feel small, insecure, and that now she was trying to change. She genuinely apologized for everything that had happened. And I, of course, was surprised, but in a good way. I didn't see her as the villain anymore, nor Jake as a threat. They were trying to rebuild their lives, and I, at last, saw that. I wasn't stuck in that cycle of hurt and pain anymore. And, in the end, I think all three of us came out a little stronger from this whole story. Looking back now, I don't know if I feel proud or relieved. Maybe a little bit of both. Dylan and Bella moved on with their lives. And me? I learned so much. I learned that my happiness never depended on them. I learned that I'm capable of being happy on my own without needing validation from anyone. I know what I deserve now, and more importantly, I know who I am. Dylan, Bella, Jake, they all played their part in the story, but who stayed, who grew, and who won was me.